The phone rang that morning. I just wanted to confirm the time of my son's wedding. On the other end of the line, my daughter-in-law's voice sounded cold, almost indifferent. We got married yesterday. At that moment, the world stopped. My heart froze, my hands trembled, and the blue dress I bought for the big day. He hung on the chair, a silent witness to the most painful exclusion of my life. The phone felt heavy in my hand, as if I knew what was coming, and yet I dialed anyway. It was morning. The smell of strong coffee wafted from the kitchen, and the clock on the wall was striking time. The table was set for one, as it has been for years, but I stubbornly straightened the tablecloth. I took a deep breath, straightened the blue dress hanging on the chair, my gift to myself. "Come on, my daughter," I murmured and let it ring. I just wanted to confirm the wedding time, nothing more, nothing less. He called 3 times and the 5th time it wasn't my boy who answered. It was her voice, smooth as polished flooring, without a crack of heat. "Hello," he said, as if answering a call from the bank on a weekday. "Hi, Bianca, it's me, Raphael's mom." A short silence, a pause that showed teeth. "Yes, ma'am, tell me." I smiled because I learned that education protects, even when we bleed inside. "I just called to confirm the wedding time, my dear." The word flower escaped me as old as day, like a handwritten cake recipe. I remembered myself as a little girl repeating "excuse me" and "thank you" at my mother's house. I learned that care is about style, not volume. And there I was, offering care when someone needed it. On the other side, I felt her breathing change, cold as old tap water. Ah. That was all, an awe that didn't invite anyone in. My heart, foolishly, took 2 steps back. I looked at the new pair of shoes under the chair. They were shining, waiting for a gentle floor. "I wanted to know the time, dear, so I can get ready calmly." And I heard the clinking of a spoon in a glass, someone stirring sugar as if drowning out an answer. The wind blew through the crack in the window and lifted the curtains, smelling of coconut soap. I blinked slowly to hold back the tear that threatened to escape. On the wall, a photo of little Raphael, full cheeks, little hand glued to mine. "It's going to be," she began, but the sentence stopped, like a crowded bus in the middle of the road. A muffled laugh in the background, far away, pierced me like a knife without a handle. "He's busy right now," she added, without apologizing, without offering an alternative. I was going to say, okay, but it wasn't okay. The taste of the coffee suddenly tasted like yesterday's. Bitter, cold, forgotten on the stove. My hand gripped the telephone cord like someone holding onto the edge of a cliff. I have held other cliffs so many times for them, I thought, and fell silent. "Can you tell me the time, please?" I insisted softly, without raising any dust. I didn't want to fight. I wanted belonging. She cleared her throat slightly, a dry, waiting room sound. "Look, ma'am, today is busy for us." The word people left me in the middle of the street, alone, without a map. I placed the palm of my hand on my chest, as if looking for a saint's medal. "I understand. It's an important day, right?" My voice came out low but firm, a thread that doesn't break easily. In my memory, I unfolded napkins and paid bills. Rent, sofa, the first month of supermarket shopping. I didn't throw it into conversation. I kept it like someone folding a sheet for another season. In fact, I learned that certain inventories of the heart are made in silence. "I just need the schedule," I repeated, and the just became too big between us. She didn't respond right away. I could have sworn she covered the microphone with her hand. Footsteps, whispers, and "I'll tell you later," and the emptiness returned to me. I tilted my head and saw my reflection in the glass of the cabinet, wrinkles that count, eyes that still search. My blue dress, made of stubborn hope, asked for a reason to exist. The coffee maker crackled like someone coughing, reminding us that life requires constant care. Bianca. I called again, as if gently tapping the door. I'm here, he said, but it sounded far away, on the other side of a raised bridge. So, dear, what time is it? She sighed. Whether from impatience or calculation, I don't know. I recognize sighs. I've lived long enough for that. Those of love go down lukewarm. Those of disdain scratch like steel wool. Maybe, he began, and the maybe sent a chill up my arms. I gripped the edge of the table. Old, faithful wood, my silent witness. All I wanted was a number, a time, a seat in the back seat. Can I call you later? She asked, cutting across the sidewalk to the shortcut. When next, my daughter? The day is already in a hurry. I spoke slowly, so she could hear the age of my affection. A notification noise, clearer laughter, glasses clinking somewhere. I, in my kitchen, was an echo searching for a wall. And the clock, cruel, didn't stop to explain anything to me. It's just that things have changed a bit. The sentence came out crooked, without any packaging. My hands froze, like when you open the window and the rain comes in without asking permission. If things have changed, why didn't anyone tell me? I thought and kept quiet. I could fill the conversation with stories, bonds, and laps. But I chose to just breathe, like someone waiting for the doctor to tell me the results. What do you mean, Bianca? I asked, still with that lullaby voice. On the other side, I felt a smile that cannot be seen, only heard. A cold smile, like someone holding a piece of news, like someone holding a knife by the handle. You better sit down, she said, gently in a way that wasn't consoling. I had already been sitting, of course, for years at the table of hope. Her left hand touched the blue dress, borrowing strength from the fabric. And then came the longest pause of the morning, the one that opens the door to what comes next. We got married yesterday. The 4 words fell across the room like crockery on the floor, without warning. I felt my ears ring, like when you get up quickly and the world fails you. I looked at the clock, as if it could deny the morning. The smell of coffee turned into cold smoke, a disembodied memory. I breathed, but the air became narrow, like the passage of an ancient door. Like yesterday? I repeated, chewing on syllables that wouldn't come out. Bianca didn't stutter. She spoke straight, smoothly, without any stumble of emotion. It was intimate, just family, she said, with that sweetness that doesn't sugarcoat anything. The word family bit me on the inside and didn't bleed on the outside. The table, which always had room for the world, suddenly became too small. I clutched the fabric of my blue dress, seeking courage in the lining. On the other side, a muffled laugh, glasses clinking, perhaps photos being taken. I could imagine the rehearsed happiness, the calculated hugs. I kept thinking about my part, small, tucked into an invisible corner. I see. I lied because I was raised not to make noise. But the body didn't lie, the hands trembled, and the heart pulled the handbrake. No one has seen, no one ever sees what happens inside a mother. It was a last-minute thing, she added, as if offering a napkin after a broken glass. I remembered how many times I held the glass, so no one would break anything. I paid for silence, I bought peace, I paid for the future in installments. And there I was, receiving a payment of indifference in plain sight. Is Raphael okay? I ventured, because a son's name calms a storm. It is, she said, and the calm sounded like a door locking from the inside. Memories came like pictures on a clothesline, swaying in the wind. The first rent, the mattress, the full fridge in the lean months. The nights I pretended not to see the disrespect by sleeping on the couch. I made soup, I turned a blind eye, I made an embroidery of patience out of the guts. All this to now be on the other end of the line, empty-handed. Congratulations, I said, because my mouth still knew the ways my heart had forgotten. On the other side, a short, almost polite pause. Thank you, she replied, and I felt the conversation had already lost its color. I got up slowly, like someone getting up from a wake. The chair scraped the floor, scratching the kitchen with the sound of chalk on a blackboard. The sun came in through the crack and didn't recognize me. The hanging blue dress seemed to laugh at my naivety. You could have warned me. I tried, digging for dignity in the carpet. It was all very rushed, she repeated, as if giving a recipe without a main ingredient. I meant that love doesn't run, love invites, love seeks us by the hand. But I swallowed it because certain truths only make noise when we need silence. I wish you happiness, I whispered, and heard my voice moving away from me. She thanked him again, and the call became thin, very thin. I leaned my forehead against the closet door and smelled the old wood. Wood has always comforted me because it has memories of home. There, leaning against the wall, I counted to 10 just like we girls did, so as not to cry. It didn't work. The tear came, and it was just one, stubborn, heavy. It flowed slowly, leaving a trail that burned and did not burn. We got married yesterday. Yesterday. Yesterday is a place I haven't been. I hung up without rushing, because rushing is for those who are still waiting. I ran my hand over the tablecloth, smoothed it out, and removed an imaginary crumb. I made new coffee, out of sheer stubbornness, to continue. The sound of boiling water reminded me that life boils even when we cool down. The clock struck once more, impassive, skeletal in its duty. And I stood, for a long moment, staring at a door that never opened. I picked up my phone again, not to call, but to look at my reflection in the black screen. I saw in my eyes a question that had no addressee. How much of myself had I given to learn late, to say no? How many times have I confused love with maintenance? How many times have I called care what was fear of loss? The steam from the coffee rose, creating an arabesque in the air and showing me the next step. The blue dress was there, hanging on the chair, like a guest that would never be called. I ran my hand over the soft fabric, remembering the day I bought it, full of hope. I wanted to shine, not as a young girl seeking looks, but as a mother, standing proudly at the altar. The seamstress said the color matched my eyes, and I believed her, smiling like a girl. Now that blue seemed to carry the full weight of the contempt I had received. It was no longer a dress, it was irony dressed in cloth. Each fold told a dream that would not come true. I imagined myself entering discreetly, sitting on the last bench, applauding softly. I didn't want to be the protagonist, I just wanted to be present. But even this humility was denied to me, and the blue dress became a reminder of a no. I held it against my chest, smelling the faint scent of fabric softener. A sweet, cruel smell that didn't match the bitterness of the morning. I remember the mirror in the store, with lights that made me look taller, more alive. You're going to rock it, ma'am, the saleswoman said, not knowing that I would rock it alone. At that moment, I saw the reflection of the woman who still believed in her children's gratitude. I wanted to parade dignity. I wanted to prove that, despite the years, I still flourished. Now, in front of the chair, I saw only the shadow of what I dreamed. The blue no longer had any brightness, only melancholy. The sound of the zipper being closed still echoed in my memory. It was the sound of preparation, of the ritual of belonging. I had rehearsed smiling greetings saying, "My daughter-in-law looks beautiful." But in the real rehearsal, the audience was silent and the scene, abandonment. The dress that was supposed to announce my presence only reinforced my absence. It was a domestic monument to contempt. I sat on the edge of the bed, The dress on my lap, heavy as a stone. The small buttons seemed to look at me, complicit in exclusion. My fingers wandered along the seams, seeking solace in straight lines. I thought about how many times I sewed clothes for my son when he was still a boy. Buttons replaced, hems adjusted, school uniforms. Now it was I who needed mending, but no one would stitch up my wounds. In the room, the sun entered timidly, illuminating the bluish color with irony. I thought about putting it in the back of the closet, out of sight. But something in me resisted. I didn't want to bury him, not yet. He needed to be there, to remind me of what I lost and what I endured. Maybe one day I would wear it, not for a party, but for myself. A silent act of resistance. I remembered when Raphael, as a child, said, "Mommy, you are the most beautiful." I smiled, believing in his innocence, believing that love was simple. Today, too adult for illusions, I saw that beauty for him became a bargaining chip. The blue dress was my investment in the dream of still being seen. And the hard truth is, he never looked at me that way again. Not after you chose to erase me from your own history. Memories mixed together like perfume and dust. The blue dress, a symbol of celebration, became mourning armor. Every detail, the discreet lace, the elegant cut, screamed of my loneliness. It was as if the fabric carried not only my body, but also my tears. There was material proof that love had no seat reserved for me. I asked myself, how long would I hold on to memories that crushed me? I closed my eyes and imagined Bianca parading in white, surrounded by applause. Meanwhile, my blue dress remained on the sidelines, without an audience. I wanted to feel pride, but the pain drowned out any possibility. It, a serene blue, contrasted with the chaos that gnawed at me inside. It was like a calm ocean on which I could not sail. And there I was, adrift in the middle of the room itself. I put the dress back on the chair, as if returning a secret. I didn't have the courage to put it away, nor to wear it. I left him there, in plain sight, as a mute witness to what happened. One day, I thought, maybe it will take on another meaning. But that morning, it weighed more than all the debts I'd ever paid. And I knew the blue dress wouldn't be forgotten any time soon. I looked at the blue dress, and it pulled me back in time, like a drawer that opens by itself. The years when Raphael still had nothing, not even a mattress to sleep properly, came to light. I, with a meager pension and a heart full of love, covered every hole as best I could. I paid the rent. I filled the grocery cart so they wouldn't be embarrassed. How many times have I climbed the hill with heavy bags, smiling so as not to show tiredness? Sacrifice, they say, is a choice. But I never felt I had a choice. I was a mother. I remember when he first called asking for help paying his electric bill. The distressed voice, saying that he couldn't leave the house dark. I ran to the bank, even with knee pain, and made the transfer the same day. He thanked me quickly, without emotion, like someone crossing a task off a list. And I smiled to myself, believing that, deep down, it was love in disguise. Because mother learns to be content with crumbs of affection. Bianca, in the beginning, was sweet. He called me his second mother and said that without me they wouldn't have been able to support themselves. He showered me with hugs, talked about gratitude, about family. I believed, of course, because an old heart clings to any tenderness. But over time, the hugs turned into short messages of gratitude. And the word mother only appeared next to an amount. I bought the new sofa. The refrigerator they showed in the photos, I was the one who paid for. I even had the bed where they slept delivered myself. Meanwhile, my old mattress sank deeper and deeper, reminding me of my renunciations. I never complained because I thought it was just the beginning. But the phase never ended. It just changed tone. How many times have I stopped buying medicine for myself to pay for medicine for him? How many times have I given up my Sunday outing so they could have meat on the table? The accounts that should have been mine were always secondary. I thought I was investing in a future where love would return. But the return came in the form of silence, coldness, indifference. And it is cruel to realize that even sacrifice can become a debt without a receipt. I remember one night when the rain wouldn't stop. Their house had a leak and I sent a bricklayer to fix it. I paid cash with the money I saved selling my old jewelry. They never asked me how I did it. They just received it as if it were an obligation. And the worst part is that I let it be an obligation, believing it was love. At Christmas, I was always the one who brought dinner. Pork leg, rice with raisins, even wine. Even if I didn't like it, I would buy it. They smiled in the photos. I was in the background, like an extra in a film I financed. On New Year's, they would travel and I would have a quiet house. I can't take you this time. It's expensive, they said. And I accepted, keeping the crackling of the fireworks as my only company. Memories pile up like unpaid bills in a drawer. I had faith that, in marriage, all my dedication would be recognized. That I would, at least, have the right to see my son happy in a suit, smiling at the altar. But I wasn't even remembered. All the years of sacrifices didn't earn an invitation. And that weighs more than any debt I've ever paid off. Now, looking back, I realized that I was an invisible support. They built the house on my back. And when it was firm, they pushed me off the foundation. This is the ingratitude that no one prepares us to face. You give, and give until you are empty. And when there's nothing left, they discover you were never essential. And I ask myself, at what point did love become a bargaining chip? When did I stop being a mother and just a wallet? Maybe it was from the first unreturned favor, from the first silence. But I didn't want to see, because hope is stubborn. And now, sitting in front of the blue dress, the bill for all those years came knocking on the door. And I no longer knew if I had the strength to continue paying. That morning, after the call, I sat at the table with my cup still steaming. The aroma that had previously warmed the house seemed different, heavy, almost metallic. I took a sip and the taste surprised me. It wasn't my usual coffee. It was bitter, more so than usual, as if it had absorbed the pain that was running through me. My tongue curled, my stomach churned, and I understood that it wasn't the coffee that had changed. It was me, and the world as I knew it had ended along with that sentence. I looked around the kitchen, seeking comfort in the familiar objects. The tablecloth, stained with old wine, seemed to mock me. The chairs, always faithful companions of family laughter, were now witnesses to the emptiness. Even the clock on the wall seemed cruel, ticking away each second indifferently. The ticking echoed louder than the sound of my breathing. And, inside me, the question, how could I have been excluded from the most important moment of his life? With every sip, the coffee reminded me of sacrifices that no longer had any flavor. I remembered the days when I sweetened the milk so Raphael could sleep peacefully. Of the mornings when he stayed up all night to prepare his lunchbox. How many times I went without coffee so he could have fresh bread for breakfast. Now, drinking alone was a morning ritual, a silent toast to wasted love. The tears came without asking permission. They fell into the cup, diluting the already bitter liquid. I felt the warmth of porcelain in my wrinkled hands, but my heart remained cold. Outside, a little bird was singing, unaware of my despair. And I wondered if the whole world was indifferent to the pain of mothers, or if it was just my world falling apart. I took a slice of stale bread, the kind we save, so as not to waste it. I bit slowly, without appetite, just to pretend there was still routine. The dry taste complemented the harsh coffee, creating a feast of desolation. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. The silence was so thick that even the crackling of bread sounded like a scream. And every crumb that fell on the tablecloth reminded me of what I had already lost. It was at that moment that I realized the kitchen, once the heart of the house, had become a prison. The walls seemed narrower, the air heavier, the ceiling lower. It was as if the space reflected my exclusion, my non-place. I got up, took a few steps, and sat down again, as if bound by invisible chains. The coffee got cold quickly, without waiting for me, just as they followed without waiting for my presence at the altar. I picked up my cell phone and thought about calling again, but the fear of the same answer froze my fingers. "We got married yesterday." The phrase hammered in his head, repeated 1,000 times. It was like a cursed echo that turned every thought into pain. I closed my eyes and squeezed the cup tightly, as if I could draw comfort from the ceramic. But I only took away more bitterness. I opened the window to let the wind in. The cold air cut my face, mixed with the smell of stale coffee. I looked outside and saw children playing in the street, running innocently. I remembered little Raphael, running with a scraped knee, asking to be picked up. I felt that that boy had died, and in his place was a man who couldn't see me. I closed the window before the wind took me with it. I sat back down and stared at the nearly empty cup. I couldn't finish, as if that coffee was an impossible sentence to swallow. I got up, threw the rest into the sink, and watched the liquid drain, dark, sad. It was like watching my own heart go down the drain. The sound of water mixing with coffee sounded like muffled crying, and I cried along, in silence. After drying my tears, I stared at the set table. A plate, a cup, a bit of bread, the perfect portrait of my loneliness. The blue dress was still there on the chair, a silent witness to the scene. And the coffee, now cold in the sink, marked the end of a cycle within me. At that moment, I realized that my life had changed forever, and that I would never drink coffee the same way again. After the cold coffee and the silence that weighed on the house, I picked up my cell phone almost by reflex. His hands were still shaking, but his fingers knew the way to social media. It was as if, deep down, I was looking for consolation, proof that it was all just a misunderstanding. I opened the app and immediately a flood of images flashed across the screen. Lights, flowers, frozen smiles. My son's wedding, which I didn't see, which I didn't experience, was there before me. The first photo hurt me more than 1,000 words. Raphael, in a suit, smiled like I hadn't seen in a long time. Beside him, Bianca was radiant, dressed in white, surrounded by her family. All the familiar faces were just from the other side, no one of my blood. I didn't appear anywhere, not even as a mentioned memory. It was as if I had never existed. I scrolled slowly, each photo a dagger stuck deeper. The candy table I helped fund at so many small parties. The flowers that resembled the ones I planted in his kindergarten. Everything seemed familiar to me, but at the same time inaccessible. They had built that moment with pieces of me, and yet they erased me. The blue dress on the chair seemed to laugh at me, mocking my empty seat. In one of the photos, I saw Raphael dancing with her mother. His eyes shone with pride, and she, moved, seemed to take on the role that had always been mine. I felt a pang in my chest, as if someone had ripped away my identity as a mother. I've never seen him smile at me like that in years. There, in front of the screen, I realized that someone had occupied my space. And I, who fought so hard, had been replaced. The comments under the photos were like hammers hitting my head. Perfect family. What a blessed couple. Everything beautiful and complete. Complete. The word echoed within me like a cruel sentence. Complete without me. Complete erasing me. My eyes burned, but I continued reading, as if picking at my own wound. It was pure masochism, but I couldn't stop. One photo in particular stopped me in my tracks. The toast. Glasses raised. Laughter rang out, and in the background a caption. Celebrating with those who have always been by our side. The letters felt like they were being spat in my face. With those who have always been on our side. And I, who was always there, was never there. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying not to break down. But the pain came in waves, like a tide that doesn't respect time. In my memory, I heard Raphael's voice as a child. "Mommy, look at me." I looked, I always looked. Now he looked into other eyes, and he didn't seem to miss mine. Technology showed me in seconds what the silence had been screaming for days. For a moment, I thought about commenting on the photos, writing something that hurt inside. But I deleted it before typing any words. I knew it didn't fit, that it would be seen as an intruder in the plot itself. The exclusion was not just physical, it was also symbolic, digital, public. On that bright screen, my absence was clearer than 1,000 presences. And I understood brutally that I was no longer part of that story. I placed my cell phone on the table and stared into the emptiness of the room. The blue dress was still there, motionless, an accomplice to my martyrdom. The walls, the old photos on the shelf, everything reminded me of the mother I was. But on social media, that mother didn't exist. There was only one narrative where I had never been, and their lives seemed to go on without the slightest trace of me. At that moment, I realized that the pain of being forgotten is greater than that of being rejected. We face rejection, fight against it, resist it. But being erased, being ignored, is like dying in silence. I, who had always given so much, was now just a shadow. And that cold screen showed me how much of myself had already been lost. Still, inside his chest, something began to stir, like a hidden ember. After seeing those photos on the networks, I sat at the table with an old folder in my hands. It was the same folder where he kept receipts, vouchers, and hastily written notes. I opened it slowly, like someone opening a diary of secrets they didn't want to read again. The yellowed pages and blurred letters stared at me like ghosts. Each paper was proof of a piece of me given away without thought. And, for the first time, I wanted to add up to understand the size of my delivery. I started with the rent, the one I paid for 3 years straight. Every month, the automatic debit came out of my account, faithful as clockwork. It was their roof, their home, sustained by my sweat and my sacrifices. I wrote the values on a new sheet of paper, and the pen almost failed halfway through. The number grew, and with it the weight on my chest. How many of my dreams were kept in the drawer to keep theirs alive. Then came the furniture. The 3-seater sofa, the double bed, the kitchen table. All chosen by me, bought in installments that ate away at my rest. I remembered the sleepless nights, doing the math, cutting out the superfluous. I told myself it was temporary, that soon they would walk on their own. But reality showed me that I had bought not just objects, but dependence. I moved on to the grocery bills. How many times have I filled entire carts, paying as if it were my routine? I wrote down values from old notebooks, remembering the days when I would leave the checkout with heavy bags and a light heart. Because at that time I believed that was love in action. Today I see that it was love confused with obligation. And the total just kept growing, like an emotional debt that was never paid. There were also medicines, recipes that they couldn't buy, but that I insisted on paying for. Expensive medications, sometimes paid in installments on a card. I remembered the pharmacist looking at me with compassion, knowing my effort. And I smiled, saying, That's just how moms are. They spare no effort. Now I realize that effort without recognition is just wear and tear. Among the paperwork, I found proof of bank transfers. Some are small in value, others are more generous, always justified by unforeseen circumstances, by difficulties, by emergencies that never ended. Each line of the statement was a part of me that dripped onto the ATM keyboard. I believed I was investing in his future. But the future arrived, and I had no place in it. I took the calculator and added up all those values. The final number almost took my breath away. It was the price of a car, a trip, even a small house. It was the price of my naivety, disguised as help. I looked at the result and felt a lump in my throat. It wasn't just money. It was years of life exchanged for nothing. I closed my eyes and remembered when I saved coins in a jar to buy a new dress. The blue dress that was still on the chair was paid for in cash, with sacrifice. And even then, I didn't get a chance to use it. Meanwhile, with my money, they lived comfortably without remembering me. It was as if I had financed my own exclusion. And that realization hurt more than any number. I took a deep breath and slammed the folder shut. The crack echoed through the kitchen, like a full stop. But inside me, there was no end. There were only questions swirling like wind in an open door. Will he ever realize the magnitude of what I've done? Or could it be that, to them, I was never more than an ATM with a heart? I stood there, staring at the closed folder on the table. The numbers were in there, weighing more than lead. But the biggest weight was on me, which I realized too late. Years of sacrifices summed up in cold, forgotten figures. And for the first time, I felt like maybe I had been too reckless in saying yes. And that the no I never said was now being charged to me with high interest. I closed the folder with receipts and stared at it, like someone staring into a mirror without a reflection. It was there, in that pile of papers, that all my sins lived. Sins given in haste, in fear, in hope of being remembered. Sins that built walls and ceilings, but also dug holes in me. And for the first time, I felt that the error was not just their ingratitude. It was in me, in not having learned to say no. My heart was beating slowly but steadily, as if it were warning me. Enough, he seemed to whisper, even though I still didn't have the courage to say it out loud. I looked at the blue dress on the chair and realized it also carried that answer. It wasn't just about the wedding, nor about the missed party. It was about a lifetime of compromise. And inside me, something began to rise again, even if timidly. I remembered my mother's words, way back when I was a girl. Whoever gives everything without measure ends up with nothing and no one. At the time, I thought it was too harsh, even unfair. Today, I understood that it was aged wisdom, saved for when I needed it. How many times have I smiled and said, sure, I'll help when, inside, I wanted to rest? How many times have I swallowed my tiredness just to maintain the illusion of a united family? I got up from the table and washed the coffee cup as if I was also washing away the pain. The water ran warmly over her hands and seemed to wash away the salt from her tears. I looked out the window and saw the open sky, indifferent to my pain. But this time I didn't feel revolted. I felt like the sky was giving me a message. Life goes on, whether I want it to or not. And I had to decide whether to keep crawling or get up. I walked around the house, each step heavier and, at the same time, firmer. I ran my fingers through the old photos on the shelf, seeing Raphael small and smiling. I missed that innocence that was lost in time. But along with the longing, a certainty was born. I cannot continue supporting an ungrateful adult. A mother's love cannot be confused with eternal submission. And I began to understand that loving myself was also an act of motherhood. I went back to the table and opened the folder again, only this time with different eyes. I didn't just see numbers. I saw choices I don't want to repeat. Each receipt was a reminder of who I was, but also of who I no longer want to be. It was as if the papers were screaming, "You've given too much." And I finally listened. I listened with my whole soul, without fear of the emptiness that would come later. Suddenly, I felt a different warmth inside me. It wasn't anger, nor resentment, but strength. The same strength that made me raise a child alone, that made me survive the storms of life. She was there, hidden, waiting for the right moment to return. And that day, between the blue dress and the yellowed receipts, she resurfaced. I wasn't just the forgotten mother. I was the woman who could still choose. I sat down again, but not to cry. I sat down to take a deep breath and, for the first time, think about myself. How long has it been since I chose something just for myself? How long has it been since I said, "I don't want to, I can't, I won't"? It was time to relearn how to speak the language of freedom itself. And it started with a simple step: denying the next request. I closed my eyes and imagined Raphael calling, asking for money for the rent. And, inside my mind, I heard my voice responding calmly, "My son, I wish you luck, but this account is no longer mine." Just imagining it, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't cruelty, it was justice towards myself. And I realized that maybe this was the lesson life had been trying to teach me. I stood up again, smoothed the blue dress on the chair, and smiled slightly. No, it had not yet lost its value. Maybe one day I would use it to celebrate myself, not them. Because the turning point wasn't in the rejected invitation, nor in the photos that hurt. The turning point was within me, the moment I realized I could stop paying to be loved. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone with myself. That night I sat at the computer breathing heavily. The screen illuminated my tired face, reflecting more than light. It reflected decision. I opened the bank app, where I had scheduled automatic payments for years. There were the monthly transfers, the ones that kept the roof over their heads. My fingers hovered over the mouse, as if they weighed tons. The time had come to cut the cord that should never have been so long. My heart was beating fast, as if asking me to wait a little longer. But inside me a firmer voice said, "Now." It wasn't just about money, it was about dignity. Every click was an act of liberation, every cancellation a silent victory. And yet, my hands trembled like those of a girl facing the unknown. The fear wasn't of losing my son, it was of finally finding myself. I confirmed the first cancellation, and a strange relief ran through me. It was like cutting a knot that had been holding me back for years. On the screen, the simple message, "Transfer cancelled." So banal, so cold, and yet so symbolic. I closed my eyes and felt a tear fall, not of pain, but of release. I had said my first no, without having to open my mouth. I moved on to the second transfer, then the third. One by one, like dismantling a house of cards. Each excluded value was a brick removed from the wall that separated me from peace. It was painful, but also necessary, like ripping off an old bandage. I knew there would be a reaction, that it wouldn't go unnoticed. But at that moment, it didn't matter. I was firm in my decision. The silence of the house seemed to be watching me. The walls held the echoes of the times I had hurriedly typed passwords to help them. Now, they kept the silent sound of a rupture. I looked at the bookshelf, at the old photos, and thought, I did what I could. But it was no longer time to hold on, it was time to let go. And letting go, I realized, is also a way of loving yourself. I remembered the first time I set up those transfers. Raphael had said, "Mom, it's just for a while, I promise." Promises that became routine that became handcuffs. I smiled, thinking I was securing his future. But the truth is, I was erasing my own present. That night, I finally broke that cycle. After canceling all orders, I closed the application. The dark screen reflected my face, and I almost didn't recognize myself. There was something different in me, a strength that had long been dormant. It was as if I had recovered a lost part of my own history. I ran my hand over my face, wiping away the tears, and took a deep breath. It was not the end of a mother's love, but the beginning of self-respect. The blue dress still sat on the chair, a silent witness to my choice. I looked at him and thought, maybe now you'll gain another sense. Because, deep down, I wasn't just cutting off financial transfers. I was also cutting off transfers of power, blame, and manipulation. And for the first time, blue didn't seem so sad to me. It even seemed lighter, as if it was smiling along with me. I lay down that night with a tired heart, but not empty. The pillow held my sigh like someone holding a precious secret. I fell asleep without blaming myself, without making excuses to justify what I did. I knew the storm would come. I knew the demands would come knocking on the door. But I also knew that I wouldn't be the same when I served them. And this certainty lulled me into a sleep I hadn't had in a long time. The transfer cut was not just financial. It was spiritual, it was emotional, it was the line that separated who I was from the woman who was beginning to be born. And in the silence of the dawn, I realized that perhaps loneliness was not the enemy. Maybe she was the way to find myself again. I smiled to myself, in the dark, and promised myself, never again would I buy love with money. And I slept peacefully, for the first time in years. It wasn't long before the phone rang. It was Raphael, with a voice I've known since I was a boy, but now filled with urgency. Mom, the rent is late. We need your help, just this month. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, remembering the transfers I had just canceled. The heart, an old accomplice, wanted to hurry up and say, "Of course, my son." But the newly awakened mind held me by the hand. "Don't go back." His voice sounded nervous, but not desperate, more anticipation than humility. It was as if he was sure that I, as always, would fall into the same scenario. I felt the kitchen spin, the blue dress on the chair watching me silently. He asked again, this time more direct, almost automatically. "We can't live without it, Mom. You know how it is." And I knew yes. I knew better than he could ever imagine. My gaze fell on the folder of receipts on the table. All the receipts that screamed the story of a sustained life. Each paper said, "Enough is enough." The silence on my part was long, and I could tell he was uncomfortable. "Mom, can you hear me?" he insisted, as if demanding a ready-made answer. And for the first time, I didn't have a rehearsed answer. My throat felt dry, my mouth tight, but I let the pause stretch out. On the other side, his breathing quickened, mixed with the background of the television being on. It was curious. In so many years, I had never made him wait. I always rushed to resolve, to alleviate, to put out the fire. But now let it burn a little so he could feel the heat too. It was a silence loaded with meaning. "Raphael, I understand your situation," I began, my voice firm, yet low. He sighed, certain that the old solution would come. But the sequel was not what he expected. "But I can't support you like this anymore." The words came out with difficulty, but they carried the weight of stone. On the other side, silence. A silence I didn't know. I could almost see his face, frowning, confused, maybe angry. "Mom, you've always helped. Why change now?" The question came as an accusation, as if I had betrayed an invisible pact. My eyes filled with tears, but I didn't back down. "Because I'm not a bank, Raphael. I'm your mother." And in that instant, I felt a tremor run through my voice, not of weakness, but of truth. He tried to argue, talking about bills, invoices, responsibilities. I listened, but I didn't absorb it in the same way. Each justification seemed repeated, rehearsed, like an echo of years gone by. It was like listening to a broken record, always on the same chorus. And I knew that if I gave in now, I would be back in the eternal cycle. So I kept quiet, just taking a deep breath, standing firm in my own decision. "So you're just going to leave us on the street?" he asked, his tone heavy with guilt. The sentence pierced my chest like a knife, but it didn't knock me down. I learned that true love cannot be sustained by blackmail. My silence was the harshest response I ever gave. I felt the tears well up, but not of regret. And yes, it was liberating because I was finally supporting myself. The call ended short, abruptly, without any affectionate goodbyes. The sound of the switch off echoed loudly in the kitchen, louder than the clock on the wall. I stood there, looking at the phone like someone looking at a border they've crossed. The heart ached, of course, but it also beat differently, more erect, more dignified. I knew that would be just the first cry for help, and that, from now on, the tests would come one after the other. I rested my head against the back of the chair and closed my eyes. In the darkness, I saw flashes of the past, him asking for toys, then asking for money. Always asking and I always giving. But now it was different. Now I said, even silently, enough. I opened my eyes, and the blue dress was still there, reminding me of what I lost. But suddenly I realized I also remembered what I was beginning to gain. The phone still felt warm in my hand as I decided that next time would be different. I spent years rehearsing gentle responses, always trying to calm, always offering a solution. But now, as I walked around the kitchen, I felt like my voice needed to learn another tone. It was no longer the voice of the mother carrying everything. It was the voice of the woman beginning to rise up. And I knew I would soon have another opportunity to put it to the test. My heart beat faster, like someone preparing for an intimate battle. Days later, the call came again. Raphael, once again, with the same urgency, asking for help to pay off overdue bills. The difference is that this time I was no longer unprepared. I took a deep breath before answering. I let the silence speak first. He poured out words quickly, like someone throwing buckets of water on a burning house. But I didn't drown, I just listened. "So, Mom, can you help me again, right? It's just this one more month." The phrase was déjà vu, a script I already knew by heart. I closed my eyes, and for a second I almost fell into the trap of the old habit. But the no was there, growing inside me, asking for space. "Raphael," I began calmly, firmly, like never before. "I can wish you luck, but I can't support you anymore." On the other side, silence. A dense, almost offended silence. "What do you mean, Mom? You always helped." The old justification, the old shock, as if my change were a crime. But this time, I didn't tremble. My voice came out calm, but with a firmness that surprised me. "Well, I always helped. And maybe that was my mistake." My throat burned, but I continued. "There comes a time when we need to learn to stand on our own 2 feet. I have walked a long way for you, and now it is your turn." Raphael sighed deeply, perhaps irritated, perhaps shocked. Inside, I was trembling like a leaf, but I didn't let it show. For the first time, I wasn't just responding. I was taking a stand. He tried to change strategy, softening his tone. "Mom, think about us. Bianca is worried." It was the old game of emotional appeal, but I was no longer a hostage to that play. I smiled to myself, without irony, just aware of what was happening. "I do think so. I think so much that I need to let you learn. Love is also knowing how far to go." My response wasn't shouted. It wasn't cruel. It was just clear, simple, as it should have been from the beginning. And that simplicity had more impact than any sermon. On the other side, I heard the silence grow, heavy, uncomfortable. He didn't expect that. He didn't know how to react. And I understood. The power of my answer was not in the tone, but in the change. When I hung up, my hands were shaking, but not from fear, from relief. I had finally broken the cycle. It was as if a door had opened inside me, revealing a new path. I looked at the folder of receipts and realized they no longer held me back. Now, they were just memories of an ancient story. And in the background, the blue dress seemed to watch me with respect. I sat in the chair and took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't easy, it wasn't painless, but it was necessary. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty about saying no. On the contrary, I felt that this no was a yes for myself. And deep down, I realized that this would be my new answer from now on. Yes to me, no to their dependence. After that call, I thought Raphael would get the message. But it wasn't long before my phone started vibrating nonstop. They were messages from Bianca, long, full of exclamation points and crying faces. She mixed sweetness and despair in a dance I already knew well. Please, you've always been so good to us. Immediately after, it is inhumane to leave your own child in this situation. Each notification was a punch to my chest, but I forced myself to read it. Some messages were full of affection, almost sweet. You are like a mother to me. Don't abandon us now. And soon after, another, hard as stone. I don't know how you can sleep soundly knowing your son could be evicted. It was as if she shot arrows and then blew perfume on the wounds. I felt my heart race, my stomach churn, my hands sweat. It was like I was being pulled back into the same old maze. Bianca knew how to play with words. She knew how to target my weaknesses. Sometimes it made me feel irreplaceable. Sometimes it made me feel guilty to the bone. And there I was, looking at the screen, fighting the biggest battle of my life. Not against her, but against the old version of myself. The messages came late into the night. One said, God is watching everything. Another, if something happens to Raphael, it will be your fault. It was an emotional storm designed to break me. But in the midst of all this, one sentence made me shiver. You should remember everything we have done for you. I was in shock. What had they done anyway? I looked at the blue dress on the chair, searching for strength. He seemed to remind me that I had not been at that altar, had no place in the celebration. So why should I be saved at the last minute to settle the bills now? The dress became, in that instant, my anchor. I needed to look at him and remember the emptiness of that exclusion. That's what kept me going through the storm of messages. Still, I won't deny it. I cried. I cried alone, silently, trying not to give in. With each notification, my hands trembled with the urge to respond. But at the same time, something in me called for patience, firmness, resistance. It was as if a new voice had been born within me. Don't answer now. Don't get carried away by the heat of emotion. I waited until the cell phone went silent. The morning became calmer, but my heart was still racing. I took a pen and paper and started writing what I wanted to answer. Words full of pain, anger, and a desire to justify. But I didn't send anything. I realized that sometimes the wisest response is silence. When the day dawned, I looked at the accumulated messages again. There were so many of them that they seemed to scream at the screen. Some even had audios, which I didn't have the courage to listen to. I knew that if I heard Bianca's crying voice, my strength might fail. So I left the audios untouched, like stones in the path that I decided not to move. And I continued to take a deep breath, remembering the promise I made to myself. Deep down, I knew those messages weren't just requests. They were attempts at control, attempts to pull me back into the trap. And I had already lived too long to remain trapped in that cycle. Words, however heavy, could no longer command me. With each tear that fell, I silently repeated, "I'm not going back." And that gave me a strange sense of victory. The day ended, and the cell phone finally went silent. But inside me, the war continued. I knew they wouldn't give up so easily. Bianca would find other forms, other speeches, other masks. But in that moment, looking at the blue dress and the folder of receipts, I felt something new. I was no longer a hostage to desperate messages. I had been expecting silence for a few days, but it didn't come. Instead, on a sultry afternoon, I heard the doorbell ring insistently. When I opened the door, there were Raphael and Bianca, side by side, with heavy expressions. Behind them, a man in a tie, leather briefcase in hand, and a rehearsed look. "This is Dr. Enrique, the family consultant," Bianca said, forcing a smile. Consultant. Family. Hand-picked words to disarm me. The man entered uninvited, adjusting his glasses, as if he already knew the script. They sat in my living room as if it were their office. Bianca began, "We just want to talk for your own good." And Raphael, with his head down, added, "Yes, Mom, we are worried about your mental health." My mental health. The perfect excuse for anyone who wants to delegitimize choices. I took a deep breath, feeling indignation boil inside. The doctor opened the folder and took out some printed papers. He spoke calmly, slowly, like someone dealing with a stubborn child. "We understand that you have made recent, difficult decisions. We are here to guide, to help get everything in order." Every word was a rope trying to lasso me back into the corral. But I, tired, was no longer cattle. I looked around the room at the furniture I had paid for myself and felt a shiver. How many times did those two sit there begging, crying, manipulating? Now they even brought witnesses, as if it were a court inside my house. The blue dress hanging on the chair seemed to watch me silently. He reminded me, "You've already been erased once. Don't allow it again." And the memory of exclusion gave me the strength to stand firm. Bianca took the lead, gesturing dramatically. "You can't isolate yourself like this. Do you think it's fair to cut everything off suddenly? Raphael suffers, I suffer, the whole family feels it." Family. He repeated that word like a mantra, as if it were magic. But I knew what they wanted was the security of my money, not my affection. And that cut me deeper than any accusation. The doctor, in a soft voice, reinforced, "Think about everyone's well-being. These sudden cuts could even harm you." He spoke in a tone of veiled threat, wrapped in a veneer of caution. I took a deep breath, rested my hands on the arm of the chair, and said, "Everyone's well-being has always come out of my pocket. Now it comes out of yours." The silence that followed was heavy as stone. Raphael shifted uncomfortably, like a boy caught in a lie. "Don't say that, Mom. It's like we've never done anything for you." The lump rose in my throat, but I didn't give in. "So tell me, Raphael, what did you do? Show me the receipt." He lowered his eyes, and Bianca nudged him, as if asking him not to react. I, for the first time, did not fear the echo of my own words. They tried to soften, change their tone, talk about reconciliation. But I had known that theater for a long time. With each speech, I saw the rope trying to pull me back. And with every breath, I cut the invisible threads that held me back. It was no longer a question of accounts, it was a question of identity. Either I stood my ground, or I would be held hostage again forever. The doctor stood up, put away the papers, and said in an almost formal tone, "We'll give you some time to think it over. We're available if you change your mind." The word, when, hurt me more than if. It was their certainty that I would go back. But inside me, for the first time, there was no shadow of doubt. I wouldn't go back. They walked out, and the door slammed shut behind them. The echo filled the room, and my hands trembled, but with firmness. I sat down, took a deep breath, and stared at the blue dress once more. He seemed to say to me, "You resisted, and no one can take that away." It was just the beginning of a war, I knew. But the attempt at control had failed, and that was already a victory. That afternoon, after their abrupt departure, I thought it would all end in silence. But when I opened the window to breathe, I saw Lourdes, my neighbor of years, standing at the gate. She pretended to sweep the sidewalk, but her curious eyes didn't hide anything. When he saw me, he lifted his chin in a complicit gesture of someone who already knew. I went down to the balcony, and before I could say anything, she said, "They're not ashamed, are they? Talking about your mental health here at home." Her words took me by surprise. I was used to facing everything alone, to swallowing insults in silence. But in that moment, I felt that someone had seen that I wasn't crazy. "Did you hear?" I asked, half embarrassed, half relieved. "Yes, I heard you, ma'am. That thin wall won't hold anything." Lourdes rested the broom handle on her shoulder and looked at me steadily. "And I say more," she continued. "You did very well not to give in." I felt my eyes well up, not from pain, but from validation. It was strange how an outside witness could bring so much strength. While they tried to make me doubt my sanity, Lourdes reminded me of reality. "I saw how many times you carried bags to their house," she said. "Now, what else do you want?" "Your whole life." The memories came flooding back. I found myself walking up the street with bags full of people, while Raphael and Bianca smiled in relief. I saw the Christmases I organized, the bills I paid, the medicines I bought. All of this hidden from the eyes of others, because I never complained. And now, hearing from Lourdes' mouth that she knew, that she saw, was an unexpected balm. It was like someone handed me a clean mirror after years of fog. Lourdes moved closer, lowering her voice. "They are trying to make you believe that you are getting weak. But I know this game very well. They want your pocket, not your property." I felt a chill because this was exactly what I was afraid to admit out loud. Suddenly, shame turned to indignation. It wasn't just my intuition. Someone else confirmed it. She smiled slightly, placing her hand over mine. "Don't blame yourself, ma'am. A mother who gives too much raises children who don't know how to be grateful." That sentence went deep, like a sharp knife, but it didn't hurt me. On the contrary, it gave me clarity. How many times have I thought this silently and blamed myself for being too hard on myself? Now someone said it out loud, bluntly. I felt that, for the first time, I wasn't fighting alone. Lourdes wasn't just a neighbor. She was a witness. She was an echo of my truth. She saw the comings and goings, the heavy looks, the veiled manipulations. And now, it confirmed that I wasn't crazy, I wasn't ungrateful, I wasn't cold. She was just a tired mother, trying to survive her own love. And this recognition was stronger than any justification Raphael could give. "Hold on tight, ma'am," she said before stepping back onto the sidewalk. "If you give in now, you will never have peace again." I stood there, watching her walk away with slow steps, the broom dragging on the floor. The simplicity of those words gave me more courage than any elegant speech. I went back inside and stared at the blue dress. He seemed lighter now, as if he carried some of the strength Lourdes had lent me. At that moment, I realized that life always puts witnesses in our path. People who, even from afar, follow our silent struggle. And when we least expect it, they appear to confirm what they try to deny us. Lourdes didn't just witness it. She validated my choice, my resistance. And I knew that the next time they tried to break me, I wouldn't be so alone. Because, somehow, that simple woman had become the guardian of my truth. After Lurd left, I was alone again in the silent room. But something had changed inside me. It wasn't the same silence as before. It was as if her every word had clung to my bones. Still, my body was shaking, and my hands wouldn't stop sweating. It was fragility speaking loudly, reminding me that I am also human. But, paradoxically, it was in this trembling that I discovered my strength. I sat down in the chair, rested my head against the backrest, and took a deep breath. My heart was still racing, as if I had run a marathon. And perhaps that was exactly what it was. An invisible marathon, years of silent resistance. The fragility of my body was just a reflection of the emotional battle being fought there. But the more I felt my legs tremble, the more I understood that I hadn't fallen. I was standing, even staggering, and that was already a victory. I looked down at my wrinkled, trembling hands resting on the table. How many times have those hands held more weight than they could handle? How many times have you held bags, bills, tears, without complaining? Now they held only themselves, searching for stability. And I realized that fragility is not synonymous with weakness. Sometimes it's proof that we resist more than we should. The blue dress was still there, reminding me of everything I lost. But in that moment, he also seemed to symbolize something new. I hadn't been able to use it at the altar, but maybe it would be for another time. A moment where I could celebrate not a party, but myself. And the mere thought of it made my body shiver with emotion. It was fragility slowly transforming into hope. My body felt tired, as if I was carrying a whole life on my back. But along with that tiredness, there was a serenity I had never experienced. It was as if I had finally let go of a heavy suitcase that I had been dragging around for years. The legs were shaking, yes, but they were free of weight. And this contrast between physical weakness and inner strength made me smile. It was a shy smile, but sincere. I remembered the sleepless nights, crying without the courage to ask for help. The days when I hid body aches so as not to worry anyone. I've always been too strong for others, but I've never allowed myself to be too weak. Now I allowed the fragility to come because I knew it was also liberation. It was the body saying, "You fought too hard, get some rest." And, for the first time, I accepted the invitation. I got up slowly and walked to the hallway mirror. I looked at my reflection, red eyes, tired face, but alive. I thought about how many times I hid so as not to look downcast. But there, in front of myself, there was nothing left to hide. I was fragile, but I was also resilient, and the combination of the two things made me whole. I went back to the room, sat down again, and closed my eyes. The sound of the clock now seemed less aggressive, almost like a breathing rhythm. The walls, once suffocating, now only held history. I realized I didn't have to win the war all at once, just one day at a time. And that day I had already won. The fragility of the body was just a reminder of the battle fought and won. I remembered an old phrase my mother used to say, "Those who tremble are still alive. Those who cry still feel. Those who fall can still get up." These words echoed like music inside me, and suddenly I realized I didn't need to hide my tears or my trembling. They were part of the process, part of the healing, part of the transformation. And recognizing this was more powerful than any bravado of strength. At the end of that night, I lay in bed exhausted, muscles heavy, chest aching, but mind lighter. I closed my eyes and silently gave thanks for the fragility that revealed me as strong. Life has shown me that even cracks have value. They are what let the light in. And for the first time in a long time, I slept without fear of being weak. because now I knew it is in fragility that my true strength is born. The next morning, I woke up with my heart still heavy. The feeling of having faced a battle alone left me exhausted. I picked up the phone and, for the first time in a long time, thought about calling my sister Clara. I hesitated because I was always the one who kept everything to myself, the one who endured in silence. But the loneliness of that moment was greater than my pride. And, before I could change my mind, I dialed the number. When Clara answered, her familiar voice brought me immediate relief. "Hi, sis, is everything okay?" I choked before answering, and the silence was answer enough. "Talk to me, what happened?" she insisted, with that sweet tone as always. The tears flowed without asking permission, wetting my blouse. "Clara, I wasn't invited to Raphael's wedding," I confessed in a whisper. On the other side, shocked silence. "What do you mean you weren't invited?" "But he's your only son." Her indignation hurt and comforted at the same time. It hurt because it confirmed the gravity of the situation. It was comforting because, finally, someone said out loud what I was afraid to admit. And I cried. I cried like a child, sobbing between broken sentences. I told her every detail, from the call to the photos on social media. I told her about the blue dress that was still looking at me from the chair. I told him about the years of sacrifices, the transfers, Bianca's messages. Clara listened in silence, but her silence was not empty. It was presence. I could feel his breath on the other side, matching the rhythm of my pain. It was as if, for a few minutes, I was no longer alone in the weight. When I finished, relief came like a wave, mixed with tiredness. "Sis, you've been too strong for too long," she said. "Now it's time to be strong in another way, by taking care of yourself." His words went deep, as if they hugged me from within. I had never allowed myself to be vulnerable with her. And in that moment, I realized how much I needed this. Clara recalled stories from our childhood. "You were always the one who protected everyone, remember? You even looked after me." I smiled through my tears, remembering the afternoons when I defended her from fights in the street. "But now it's my turn to take care of you," she said firmly. I felt a lump in my throat, but also a new hope. Because, for the first time, someone offered to be my support. We talked for hours, and with each sentence I felt the weight lift. She didn't judge me. She didn't say I was wrong. She just listened to me. And that, more than any advice, was what I needed. In the end, he promised me, "I won't let you go through this alone." I closed my eyes and silently thanked him for calling. It was as if a window had opened in a dark house. When I hung up, the silence in the house no longer seemed so cruel. It still hurt, but now there was an echo of complicity. I looked at the blue dress, and for the first time, I didn't feel angry at it. It still represented exclusion, but it also began to symbolize resistance. Because by telling my story to Clara, I had recovered part of myself. And that part, now, could no longer be erased. I lay in bed that night feeling a strange peace. The pillow no longer seemed an accomplice to loneliness, but the guardian of a shared secret. I understood that, sometimes, strength comes precisely from confessing weaknesses. And that opening your heart to someone you trust can be the first step towards healing. Clara gave me back hope that I still had a real family. And I fell asleep thinking that maybe tomorrow would be less heavy. The next morning I woke up different. The sun came in through the window with a delicacy I hadn't noticed in a long time. I looked at the chair and saw the blue dress still there, waiting, silent. But this time, it didn't seem to be mocking me. It seemed to invite me to a reunion. I got up slowly and decided it was time to face that piece of fabric. I ran my hand over the soft fabric, as if caressing a memory. I closed my eyes and remembered the day I bought it, full of anticipation. At that time, he represented the hope of being seen, recognized, loved. Now, the same dress took on another meaning. He would no longer be a symbol of exclusion, but of my new beginning. And just thinking about it made my heart warm. I put it on slowly, pulling the zipper with trembling hands. When I looked in the mirror, I saw wrinkles, I saw marks, I saw the time stamped on it. But I also saw a woman who was still standing, despite everything. The blue looked more vivid in the morning light. It was as if the dress had been waiting for exactly this moment. Not to shine at my son's wedding, but to shine on myself. I took a few steps across the room, and the fabric followed my movement. It was light, different from the weight I carried days ago. I felt a pang of forgotten vanity, a desire to see myself beyond the pain. I grabbed an old lipstick and applied it to my lips, smiling when I saw myself in the mirror. It had been years since I had dressed up for myself, and in that moment, I realized how much I missed it. The blue dress became a renaissance. He no longer spoke of what I lost, but of what I could still build. It was like a flag of resistance raised in silence. And when I saw myself reflected in the mirror, I realized that I wasn't just a victim. I was a survivor. And this realization made my tears fall, but this time of relief. I walked to the kitchen, made a fresh cup of coffee, and sat down at the table. This time, the taste wasn't so bitter. It was as if the simple act of getting ready had sweetened life a little. I looked at the folder of receipts and smiled. They were still there, but they no longer had the same power. It was as if the blue dress had given me permission to breathe. I took out my phone and took a picture of myself, something I rarely did. I sent it to Clara with the caption, "I still know how to be beautiful." Minutes later, she responded with heart emojis and words of encouragement. I laughed to myself, feeling almost like a teenager, rescuing a forgotten piece of myself. It wasn't empty vanity, it was reconciliation with myself. And that was worth more than any missed party. As I walked through the house, I noticed something curious. The blue dress seemed to illuminate the dim corners. As if, by transforming me, he also transformed the space around me. The walls no longer seemed so narrow, nor the clocks so cruel. It was as if life gave me back colors that I myself had forgotten to see. And it all started with the courage to wear it. At the end of the day, I sat on the porch still wearing the dress. The wind swayed the light bar, and I felt at peace. Not with the past, but with myself. The blue was now mine, not theirs, not a ceremony from which I was excluded. It was my symbol of freedom, of rebirth. And I realized that sometimes life gives us back what they tried to steal from us. I closed my eyes and silently thanked him. I was grateful for having resisted, for not giving in to blackmail, for getting dressed. The blue dress, which was once pain, was now strength. And I, who was once a shadow, now became light to myself again. That night, I still fell asleep with it, like someone keeping an amulet. And I dreamed not of losses, but of new beginnings. I knew their silence would not last. And it wasn't long before the counterattack came, fierce, calculated, full of venom. It started with long messages, almost letters, written by Bianca. She said I was cold, manipulated, ungrateful, that I had allowed myself to be influenced by outsiders. And every word was an attempt to reverse the roles. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? The sentence pierced me like a knife, because I knew that reality was different. It had been years of sacrifice, and now they were trying to paint it as if I were the one in debt. It was a game of mirrors, where they reflected in me what they were actually doing. And as much as it hurt, I recognized the trick. It wasn't love, it was a control strategy. Raphael also joined in the dance, his voice deep over the phone. "Mom, I never thought you would turn your back on us." The guilt was wrapped in longing, in the tone of a wounded son. But behind it, I perceived the same intention, to make me give in. I didn't turn my back, Raphael. I just don't carry the weight that isn't mine anymore, I said firmly, feeling my own voice sustain me. They reacted with fury. They said I was poisoned, that someone had put things in my head. It was almost funny. When I finally used my own reason, I became someone else's puppet. But deep down, I knew this accusation was a sign they were losing control. And nothing scares someone who manipulates more than losing control. Therefore, they attacked even more. Bianca sent audio messages crying, alternating between sweetness and resentment. At one point, he called me Little Mother of the Heart. The next, he said I was ungrateful and selfish. It was a carousel of emotions projected onto me, and I almost felt dizzy. But the blue dress, hanging on the hanger in front of me, reminded me of my decision. I had already said no, and I wasn't going back on it. The accusations became increasingly serious. They said I would be forgotten, that I would die alone, that no one would visit me. They touched on the most fragile point of any mother, the fear of loneliness. For a moment, my hands shook and I felt like crying. But then I thought, I've been alone for years, even though I keep them company. And I realized that solitude with peace is worth more than purchased company. The counterattack was beyond words. I discovered that they had started spreading stories about me to acquaintances. She's not well, she's getting confused. The old narrative, planted like a poisonous seed. But instead of shaking me, it only confirmed how desperate they were. If they needed to demoralize me, it was because they no longer had power over my choices. Despite that, I won't lie, it hurt. Each accusation hurt me because it came from my own blood. It was like being stoned from inside your own house. But between pain and dignity, I chose the latter. I might bleed, but I wouldn't kneel again. And that choice made me stronger every day. That night I sat in front of the mirror dressed in blue. I looked at my own reflection and said out loud, "You are not cold. You are not ungrateful. You are not manipulated." It was like a mantra, repeated until you believed it. Because I knew their biggest counterattack wasn't external. It was trying to make me doubt myself. And there, in front of the mirror, I realized they could shout, accuse, distort. But they couldn't control me anymore. Their counterattack only served to confirm that I was on the right track. And the more they tried to pull me, the more I took root in myself. The war wasn't over yet, but I was no longer fighting on the same field. And that, deep down, was my true victory. After the whirlwind of accusations, I sat silently in the room. The words still echoed, trying to erode my confidence. But then I remembered something simple. Memory is a compass. And mine, loaded with years of stories, showed me where to point. I didn't have to believe what they were saying now. It was enough to remember everything I had already experienced with them. I remembered every slight disguised as normality. The times they slammed the door without looking back. The family gatherings where I was left in a corner, almost invisible. The denied hugs, the wilted smiles, the dry words. Every detail forgotten by them, but tattooed on me. And the memory hurt, but it also cleared the vision. I remembered the nights when Bianca would roll her eyes when I arrived. Or the times Raphael would change the subject when someone asked about me. It all seemed small at the time, but now it made sense. It was a slow construction of distance, like someone blowing out a candle little by little. I, blinded by love, didn't want to see. But memory now showed me the whole picture. Bank transfers weren't just numbers. They were chapters in a story of silent manipulation. Every receipt I kept told me, "You were always there." And at the same time, every photo without me told me, They never wanted me there. The contradiction was brutal, but revealing. And memory helped me put the pieces together. I felt the tears well up, but they weren't from weakness. They were tears of recognition, of acceptance. Memory didn't lie, didn't distort, didn't play against me. She was the most faithful witness to my life. And while they tried to convince me that I was ungrateful, I had living proof engraved on myself. I took an old album from the shelf, full of yellowed photos. Raphael, small and smiling, on the lap of his mother, whom he had now forgotten. There was no manipulation there. There was no lying. There was only pure love, given without measure. And flipping through those pages made me realize I wasn't crazy. My story was there, intact. I closed the album and stared at the blue dress. He also already carried memory, but now with a different weight. It was a reminder of exclusion, yes, but also of rebirth. Every time I looked at him, I remembered who I was before the pain. And that memory guided me like a lighthouse in the midst of the storm. Not backward, but forward. My memory showed me that I had already endured much more than I should have. That every time I gave in, I lost a piece of myself. And that now it was time to rebuild. Not based on their accusations, but on the truths that only I knew. If life was a map, my memories were the coordinates. And they pointed to me. Keep going forward, don't go back. I closed my eyes and let the scenes blend together. Raphael's laughter as a child, Raphael's contempt as an adult. The hugs that didn't exist, the requests that never stopped. Everything was coming together inside me like a painful puzzle. And in the center of it, a certainty emerged clearly. I wasn't wrong in saying no. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized that my memory was stronger than any accusation. They could twist words, make up stories, paint me as a villain, but they couldn't erase what I lived, what I saw, what I felt. And that was enough. Because when we trust our own memory, no manipulation can steal our direction. The next morning, I woke up with a decision pulsing inside me. I had already cut off transfers, resisted manipulation, faced accusations. But I knew there was still something missing, truly protecting the little that was mine. I no longer wanted to live at the mercy of blackmail, nor run the risk of losing everything. So I grabbed my bag and left, with firm steps despite my shaky legs. It was time to seek out the public defender. The way there seemed longer than it actually was. Every corner brought memories of comings and goings to help Raphael. I found myself carrying bags, going to the bank, solving problems that weren't mine. But now, destiny was different. I was going to sort out my life. The sun was beating down, and yet there was a freshness inside me. It was as if the simple act of walking was already a manifesto of freedom. Arriving at the public defender's office, my hands were sweating cold. I never thought that one day I would be there, asking for help to protect myself from my own son. But life, hard and ironic, put me in that place. I was greeted by a young woman with an attentive look. "How can I help you, ma'am?" she asked, and my voice, still trembling, replied, "I want to protect my accounts." I explained my story in detail, every bit of pain and courage. The girl wrote everything down, without judging me, just listening patiently. When I finished, she said, "You did well to seek guidance. We can help ensure that no one takes what is yours from you." Those words sank deep, like a blanket over a tired body. I was no longer helpless. As she talked about documents and measurements, my mind wandered. I remembered the nights I slept worried, thinking about their bills. The times I emptied my pockets to fill theirs. And now, for the first time, I was filling mine with courage. It was a small gesture for the world, but immense for me. The first step of a new life. I left the public defender's office with a folder of papers in my hands. They weren't just documents, they were symbols of autonomy. The wind blew lightly against my face, as if the entire street was greeting me. I looked up at the sky and smiled discreetly. There was still pain, there were still open wounds, but I walked. And that, in that moment, was all. On the way back, I bought a small bouquet of yellow flowers. I put them in a vase as soon as I got home. The vibrant petals lit up the room, bringing an air of new beginnings. I looked at the blue dress and the flowers, and I saw the connection. Both symbolized transformation. Both reminded me that I still had a right to beauty. I sat at the table with a cup of fresh coffee. This time, the taste was not bitter. It was strong, full-bodied, as if reflecting my new posture. I leafed through the old receipts again, but I didn't cry. I just shook my head and thought, never again. It was the silent oath of someone who decided to protect their own heart. The house seemed larger, more airy. The walls didn't suffocate me. The clock wasn't an enemy. Even the furniture, which had once weighed down like souvenirs of sacrifice, now seemed just furniture. It was as if I had driven the ghosts out of me. And finally, the house was home again. Home of a woman who was starting over. At night, I lay in bed and closed my eyes serenely. There were no collection messages, no emergency calls. There was just me, my thoughts, and the certainty that I was on another path. It was just the first step, I knew. But every new life begins like this, with a step. And I finally had given mine. I thought that, after the defense, silence would come as a reward. But I was wrong. Their voices came back, not only on the phone but also through messages they sent through third parties. A distant cousin called me, saying that it was ugly for a mother and son to live like that. A neighbor commented, almost critically, "Raphael looked so down the other day." It was clear. They did not accept my decision, and now they used other mouths to reach me. And every word, even coming from outside, carried the weight of manipulation. I remember the times when Raphael was little and would scream my name when he was scared. At that time, his voice was my purest calling, my compass of love. Now, as an adult, his voice was full of demands, blackmail, and guilt. And it hurt to realize the transformation. It hurt because I was still my son. But I also knew that love could no longer imprison me. Love without respect is just a chain with a pretty bow. Bianca's messages became even more aggressive. She wrote long sentences, full of indignation. "You are being manipulated. You are being influenced by envious people. God will charge you for every tear Raphael shed." I read and reread, my heart racing, but without responding. Silence was my new form of resistance. Sometimes, I confess, I almost gave in. My hand glided over the keyboard, ready to type a "let's talk." But then I remembered the blue dress, the empty altar, the photos on social media. I remembered the knot that suffocated my chest when I saw there was no place for me. And that held me back. It was memory protecting me from regression. With each attempt they made, I discovered a new part of myself. A part that was previously silent, but now knew how to say no. No to manipulation, no to theater, no to threats. It was difficult, it was painful, but it was also liberating. Because deep down, every time I resisted, a piece of me was reborn. And this rebirth was worth the pain of confrontation. I began to realize that it wasn't just a fight about money. It was a struggle for power. They had gotten used to having me as a foundation, as a crutch. And when I removed that support, their house began to shake. And instead of learning to build themselves, they tried to blame me for the rubble. But I no longer accepted carrying ruins that weren't mine. In the silent nights, the voices still echoed in my mind. Words of accusation, phrases that burned like a red-hot iron. But I began to respond in my thoughts, firmly, clearly, serenely. I'm not cold. I'm fair. I'm not ungrateful. I'm a survivor. I am not manipulated. I am finally free. It was strange, but repeating it silently strengthened me. As if each response was another stone in the wall I was building against the attacks. And little by little I realized that I was no longer the same. The fragility still existed, but now it was accompanied by firmness. It was the paradox of life. Only those who know weakness understand true strength. And I, finally, began to understand her. The voices would continue, I knew. They wouldn't give up any time soon. They wouldn't easily accept losing control. But inside me, something had already changed. I was no longer a hostage to guilt, no longer a prisoner of silence. Now every word against me was just proof that I was right. And this certainty was my invisible shield. That night, before going to sleep, I propped my blue dress against the headboard. I looked at him as one would look at a raised flag. I smiled slightly, feeling that, despite the voices, the path was mine. And I thought, they can shout, but I no longer obey. I closed my eyes in peace, knowing the battle was not over. But finally, I was ready to face it. The next morning I woke up with a strange serenity. It wasn't the absence of pain. It still lived within me. But it was as if, after so many battles, I had accepted that I could not change others. I got up slowly, made my coffee, and stared at the blue dress on the hanger. He was no longer a reminder of exclusion, but a witness to my resistance. And I realized I was ready to take the final step. I picked up the receipt folder again, but this time not to add up or cry. I took it to say goodbye. I leafed through every receipt, every statement, every trace of the woman who said yes to everything. And calmly, I began to tear them one by one. The sound of the paper tearing was liberating, almost musical. It was like cutting, once and for all, the last invisible tie that still held me. As I tore, flashes of memory came to my mind. The rent I paid, the groceries I carried, the medicines I bought. Each memory was a wound, but also a lesson. And the more papers piled up in the trash, the lighter I felt. As if, finally, I was giving back to time what was never mine. It was a silent but powerful catharsis. Then I went to the closet and put on the blue dress again. Not for a party, not to be seen, but for myself. I looked in the mirror and saw not just a mother, but a woman reborn. Blue reflected dignity, courage, and a beauty that time has not stolen. And in that moment, I understood that the dress no longer carried pain. He carried victory. I sat at the table, with a cup of hot coffee. This time the taste was strong, intense, but not bitter. It was as if the coffee itself had learned from me to resist. I looked out the open window and felt the cool wind touch my face. It was no longer the wind of an empty house, but of a home under reconstruction. And for the first time, I didn't fear the future. I picked up the phone and wrote a short message to Raphael. Son, I love you, but from now on you walk on your own 2 feet. I didn't wait for an answer, nor did I want to. It was a farewell to a cycle, not an eternal bond. The love continued, but the control was gone. And I felt whole in that gesture. At night, before going to bed, I lit a small candle in the kitchen. The fire danced peacefully, illuminating the silent walls. The flame seemed to say to me, "You are not alone. You are with yourself." I sat in silence, feeling the energy in the house shift. It was no longer a place of demands and tears, but of choices and peace. And this simple ritual marked my new beginning. The last bond one cut was not with Raphael or Bianca. It was the guilt I carried throughout my life. The guilt of not being enough, of not giving enough, of not being seen. I realized that this was never my fault. It was placed on me. And now, as I let her go, I felt a freedom I had never known. It was like breathing for the first time after years of suffocation. I went to bed that night still wearing the blue dress. I closed my eyes and thought of Clara, of Lourdes, of all the memories that sustained me. I didn't cry, I didn't tremble, I just smiled silently. I knew the fight wasn't over, but that I wasn't the same anymore. From then on, every step would be mine. Every choice would be mine. And I would never stop protecting myself again. When sleep came, it was light, gentle, almost childlike. I dreamed not of parties or invitations, but of an open, illuminated field. I walked alone, but without fear, with my blue dress fluttering in the wind. And for the first time, I didn't miss anyone by my side, because I understood that deep down, the company I always looked for was within me. And that was the true new beginning of my life. And so, after so many years of sacrifice, I learned the hardest lesson of my life. Love cannot be bought, gratitude cannot be forced, and silence is also an answer. The blue dress, which once symbolized exclusion, today represents my freedom. I discovered that when we stop paying to be loved, we discover who really stays. And now I ask you, how far would you go to be accepted by your own family? How many yes have I said that cost you sleepless nights? Deep down, don't you also need to learn to say no? Stories like mine show that no one comes out unscathed when love becomes a bargaining chip. And maybe you know someone who needs to hear this today. If this story touched your heart, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories. Because, in the end, we all have a blue dress tucked away somewhere in our lives. And it is up to us to decide whether it will be a reminder of pain or a symbol of rebirth.